For this assignment, I decided to highlight the life and accomplishments of Senator Barbara A. Mikulski, her role in social community development, and her influence in local, state, and countrywide political systems cannot be understated. She is the perfect example of how important the roles that social workers can have in social welfare policy and development. Mikulski was born and raised in the Highlandtown neighborhood of Baltimore, the city that she would spend the rest of her life advocating for. Highland was home to a large and close-knit Polish community. As a child, Mikulski was babysat by her great-grandmother, a Polish immigrant who had left Poland at 16 years old for an arranged marriage and in search of more opportunity. Being brought up by her Polish family and their community, Mikulski developed a deep fondness for her roots and a solidarity with other Eastern European immigrants in Baltimore. Mikulski was not only raised to be proud of her heritage, but she was also raised to honor this heritage through service to her neighbors. While her parents would allow a struggling neighbor to open up a line of credit in their store, Barbara would deliver food and groceries to elderly neighbors who were unable to leave their homes. Service to the community was one of Mikulski's greatest values as she grew up, and was one she was dedicated to throughout her life. Mikulski received a bachelor's in sociology and then went on to graduate with an MSW from the University of Maryland School of Social Work in 1965. While studying for her MSW, Mikulski specialized in social strategy to help communities organize so that they could support themselves. After earning her MSW, she went on to work with the Catholic Charities of Baltimore as a social worker, where she led programs to educate senior citizens about Medicare. She then went on to work for the Department of Social Services as their Associate Chair of Community Organizing. Through these organizations, Mikulski helped families access resources like welfare programs, champion legal reform, and continued to promote the rights of the elderly population in her community. While working as a social worker, Mikulski became involved in the burgeoning civil rights movement, campaigning against segregation and working to ease tensions between the Black and white communities in the city. Mikulski began her journey into politics and activism when she heard about plans to build Interstate 95, which was a 16-lane highway that was to be built through Baltimore's historic districts. This highway would not only threaten historic areas of Baltimore, but it would also have cut through the first Black home ownership neighborhood in the city. In 1971, Mikulski helped found the Southeast Council Against the Road, and her campaign ultimately prevailed. Mikulski became known as the street fighter who beat the highway and became a staunch advocate for the underrepresented minority communities of Baltimore. It was during this time, fighting against the construction of the interstate, that Mikulski realized she could use her social work training to bring about systematic change. In 1971, after defeating the construction project, Mikulski ran for Baltimore City Council and won. Throughout her time on the council, Mikulski proved herself a worthy politician. Though many of her more conservative colleagues were concerned with how liberal she was, Mikulski was building a large constituency with the elderly, who she gladly championed in her work. She headed up efforts to organize a more powerful Committee on Aging and Retirement for the Baltimore City elderly population. She was also instrumental in developing legislation that would add more services and educational programs for that population. Her time as a social worker, Mikulski gained important experience and knowledge of Baltimore's family needs. So many of the older residents in her district appreciated her honest efforts to serve them, and they returned the favor in votes. With the momentum from her work with the Baltimore City Council, Mikulski decided to run for a seat in the U.S. Senate in 1974. She lost this first race to the incumbent, but with the recognition she acquired through her campaign, Mikulski easily claimed a seat in the House of Representatives from Maryland's 3rd District in the next election cycle in 1976. In the House, Mikulski expressed passion for social welfare and women's rights. She held fast in her defense of Social Security and welfare benefits during the Reagan era when cuts to social programs were largely eliminated. She was a fiery feminist at the time when the women's movement was launching its second wave. Mikulski championed the Equal Rights Amendment, helped pass legislation that would argue to increase accessibility for abortion services, and support survivors of intimate partner violence and rape. She also introduced successful resolutions for a week commemorating women in history, which would eventually turn into Women's History Month. Determined to continue making progress, Mikulski ran for the U.S. Senate again in 1986 after a decade in the House. In this time, she had learned more about politics, legislation, and getting things done in Congress. She had also further endeared herself with Maryland as a national politician who was always in touch with local interests. Mikulski had matured as a politician and continued to stay in touch with her social roots and advocate for those the government tends to leave behind. My favorite story about Barbara's passion and determination to make change comes from her early years as a senator. When she was first sworn into the Senate, Mikulski was one of only 2 women. The other woman was Nancy Kassebaum, a Republican from Kansas. Despite their small numbers, Mikulski and Kassebaum teamed up one day during a session of Congress to disrupt a sexist double standard that plagued them for too long. On weekends, men in the Senate were able to dress more casually in khakis and blazers. The women, however, were still expected to wear skirts. Fed up with this age standard, the 2 women senators staged what would come to be known as the Pantsuit Rebellion of 1993. They and all other female staffers who came to the Senate floor would wear trousers one weekend in spite of tradition. The Senate parliamentarian had to double-check the rules to ensure that women in pants were not outside of Senate decorum. Once it was confirmed that pantsuits were allowed, women in trousers have been allowed on the Senate floor ever since. Since her pantsuit protest, Mikulski has seen many more women enter the chamber and has proudly supported her female colleagues by hosting bipartisan power workshops. In these regular informal meetings, Mikulski dictates that there are to be no staff, no memos, and no leaks. Rather, the meetings provide an opportunity for the Senate women to converse, understand each other, and create networks of support. As a legislator, Mikulski sponsored the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which ensured that those who are victims of unequal pay, as many women are, would be able to fairly challenge that discrepancy in court. The Lilly Ledbetter Act was a momentous piece of legislation that many women across the nation championed, and it was the first bill signed into law by President Barack Obama in 2009. Mikulski has not stopped trying to ensure equal pay for women, and in 2014, she passionately introduced the Paycheck Fairness Act onto the floor of the Senate. In her impassioned speech, she said, "You know, when we women raise an issue, we're too emotional. While I am emotional, I am so emotional about this. It brings tears to my eyes to know that women every single day are working so hard and getting paid less. I get angry, I get outraged, I get volcanic." Though she is mostly known for her passion for women's rights, Mikulski was also a great advocate for children and elderly population, which is where I think her experience working in social services truly shines through. The years she spent in Baltimore in the field as a social worker clearly influenced the policies she championed. Because of her experience, she knew there was a need for these kinds of services and understood how to advocate in a way that other politicians would listen. She really is the epitome of a macro social worker. As a new senator in 1987, she helped pass the Spousal Anti-Impoverishment Act, which keeps seniors from going bankrupt while paying for her spouse's nursing home expenses. She has also pushed for better National Health Institute funding so that the agency could continue research on Alzheimer's disease. After watching her father struggle with the disease later in life, she has committed herself to guiding federal funds toward Alzheimer's research. In the middle of her 5th term, Senator Mikulski became the longest-serving woman in Congress. As Maryland's senior senator, she also became the longest-serving member of Congress in state history. In March 2015, Mikulski announced that she would be retiring from the Senate once her term ended. In her statement, she told people that there was nothing gloomy about the announcement and that she simply wanted to shift her trajectory. She said, Do I spend my time raising money, or do I spend my time raising hell? Remarking on Mikulski's inspiring career, President Obama said, "Senator Mikulski is more than a legendary senator for the people of Maryland. She is an institution in the United States Senate. Barbara's service to the people of Maryland spans decades, but her legacy will span generations. Barbara is the longest-serving woman in Congress, and her leadership serves as an inspiration to millions of women and girls across the globe to stand up and lead." In her retirement announcement, Mikulski was proud of her achievements in Congress and excited for what the future would hold. She emphasized that she wanted to devote her time to serving Maryland. She said, "I want to give 120% of my time to my constituents because it's never been about me, it's always been about them." Upon the announcement of her retirement, the National Association of Social Workers, the NASW, thanked Mikulski for her 38 years of leadership in Congress and for her strong and unwavering support of the social work profession and the issues important to social workers. During her career, she has used her social work skills and values to champion issues that promote the well-being of society, especially those most in need. She was also a sponsor of the Social Work Reinvestment Act, which helped to secure federal and state investment in professional social work to enhance societal well-being. She is a role model to generations of social workers and has lived up to the ideals that the profession by showing a willingness to work with members of all parties and people from all walks of life to pass legislation that improves the lives of millions. Senator Barbara Mikulski's incredible career as an activist, a feminist, and a congresswoman has greatly impacted the world for the better. She has helped save downtown Baltimore from a highway, opened up new possibilities for women of the United States, and greatly helped the United States continue to go better. In her first couple years in the Senate, Mikulski remarked that, "I don't think that the purpose of politics is politics. It is the purpose of achieving a higher public good." Thank you.